Most people don't fail at retirement because they didn't earn enough money. They fail because they believe the wrong things for too long. They believe that more income would fix poor habits, that safety meant avoiding risk, that time would wait. And one day, quietly, without warning, retirement arrives, not as freedom but as fear. Today is not about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about the invisible mistakes that quietly steal decades from your future. Listen carefully, because these mistakes are common and completely avoidable. Retirement mistakes rarely happen all at once. They happen slowly, quietly, almost politely. They don't knock on the door. They wait until you stop paying attention. One of the most common mistakes is believing that a steady income means long-term security. Income feels good. It reassures the mind. But income stops the moment effort stops. True security doesn't come from what arrives every month. It comes from what keeps working when you don't. Ownership, patience, and long-term thinking build foundations. Chasing income alone builds ceilings that collapse when time catches up. Another mistake comes from fear wearing a very respectable disguise. It calls itself caution. It says, wait until things feel safe, but growth never feels safe at the beginning. Avoiding discomfort may protect emotions in the short term, but it quietly taxes the future. The greatest risk is not volatility. It's standing still while the world moves forward. Time is often misunderstood. People treat it as abundant when it is scarce, and scarce when it is abundant. Early years are traded casually for comfort. Later years are spent wishing for one more decade. Compounding is not just financial, it's behavioral. Small, disciplined actions repeated over time become extraordinary. Delay is expensive, not because of what is lost today, but because of what never gets the chance to grow. Many believe that knowledge alone will secure retirement. Books are read, videos are watched, advice is collected. But knowledge without behavior is powerless. The gap between knowing and doing is where most futures are lost. Discipline isn't dramatic. It's quiet, it's boring, and it works. Consistency matters more than brilliance. Habits outperform intentions every single time. Another quiet mistake is believing retirement is an age instead of a condition. It's not about stopping work. It's about removing fear. The goal isn't leisure, it's freedom of choice. When money decisions are made to impress others, peace is delayed. When they're made to serve long-term values, peace arrives earlier than expected. Spending habits often mirror emotions more than logic. Comfort purchases today feel small, but repeated daily they become permanent obligations. Wealth grows when expenses grow slower than wisdom. Simplicity isn't sacrifice, it's clarity. The fewer things required to feel satisfied, the more powerful financial decisions become. Perhaps the most painful mistake is believing it's too late to start. That belief costs more than any market loss. Progress begins the moment responsibility replaces regret. The future doesn't demand perfection, it rewards direction. Retirement should not be a cliff at the end of life. It should be a bridge built slowly, plank by plank, year by year. The real secret isn't intelligence. It isn't timing. It isn't luck. It's patience. It's discipline. It's respect for time. And when those are in place, retirement stops being something to fear and becomes something quietly inevitable. One of the most dangerous financial misunderstandings is believing that income equals security. It feels logical. A paycheck arrives on time. Bills get paid. Life appears stable. But stability can be an illusion when it depends entirely on continued effort. Income comforts the present, but security protects the future, and the two are not the same. Income is reactive. It responds to time, energy, and health. Miss a few days, a few weeks, or a few months, and it weakens. Security, on the other hand, is built. It exists quietly in the background, growing stronger even when attention drifts elsewhere. The mistake is not earning income. The mistake is stopping there. Many people spend decades climbing income ladders, believing each raise moves them closer to safety. But higher income often comes with higher obligations, bigger homes, larger debts, more expectations. The margin for error shrinks, while the illusion of progress grows. When income rises faster than discipline, security quietly moves further away. True security does not depend on being needed every morning. It depends on having assets that work without asking for permission. It depends on systems that do not panic when the market stumbles. It depends on decisions made years earlier when the urgency was low, but the opportunity was high. Another hidden danger is emotional dependence on income. A regular paycheck creates confidence. But sometimes that confidence is borrowed. It belongs to the job, the industry, or the economy, not to the individual. When identity becomes attached to income, fear enters every decision. Risk is avoided. Change feels threatening. Growth slows. Comfort becomes a cage. Security is not about eliminating risk. It is about choosing which risks are worth taking. Relying on a single income source is not conservative. It is fragile. Real resilience comes from diversification, patience, and ownership. It comes from accepting short-term uncertainty in exchange for long-term stability. There is also a moral comfort in income that can be misleading. Earning feels virtuous, investing feels passive, but wealth has never been about effort alone. It has been about direction. Hard work applied without ownership often benefits someone else more than the worker. Hard work paired with long-term thinking compounds quietly and relentlessly. Another common error is assuming income will always grow. Careers feel permanent while they are happening. Industries feel stable until they aren't. Technology, health, policy, and markets change without apology. Security does not ask whether the world will change. It prepares for the fact that it will. The irony is that chasing security through income often creates the very anxiety people are trying to avoid. Every month becomes a test. Every downturn feels personal. Every decision carries pressure. But when security is built slowly through disciplined saving, patient investing, and controlled spending, money decisions become calmer. The future becomes less loud. Spending behavior reveals the truth. When income increases, lifestyles often expand automatically. But security is not found in what is visible. It is found in what remains unseen. Emergency margins, long-term holdings, time flexibility. These are not exciting purchases, but they buy something more valuable than status. They buy peace. Security is also psychological. Knowing that tomorrow does not depend entirely on today's performance changes how choices are made. It encourages patience instead of panic, thoughtfulness instead of impulse, long-term alignment instead of short-term relief. Perhaps the most overlooked truth is that income can stop suddenly, but habits continue. Those who build security early don't rely on motivation later. They rely on systems, automatic saving, consistent investing, controlled spending. These habits are unglamorous, but they compound into freedom. Confusing income with security is not a failure of intelligence. It is a failure of perspective. Income feels immediate, security feels distant, but time reverses their importance. What feels urgent now becomes irrelevant later. What feels optional now becomes essential. The goal is not to earn less. The goal is to depend less. When income serves security instead of replacing it, fear fades, decisions become clearer, and the future stops feeling like a question mark and starts feeling like a quiet promise. letting fear disguise itself as caution. Fear rarely announces itself honestly. It doesn't say, "Stop, I'm afraid." Instead, it borrows respectable language. It calls itself caution. It calls itself patience. It calls itself waiting for the right time. And because it sounds responsible, it is rarely questioned. Caution is necessary. Fear is not. The difference lies in intention. Caution measures risk so progress can continue. Fear measures risk so progress can stop. When fear wears the mask of wisdom, it becomes especially dangerous because it convinces people they are being smart while slowly holding them still. Many people believe avoiding risk is the safest path forward, but safety is not found in stillness. The world does not pause. Markets evolve, skills expire, opportunities shift. Standing still while calling it being careful often carries more danger than movement ever could. The greatest losses in life rarely come from taking a calculated step forward. They come from years of not stepping at all. Fear is patient. It doesn't demand an immediate decision. It suggests delay, just a little more information, just a little more certainty. But certainty is an illusion. It never arrives fully formed. Those who wait for perfect clarity often wait forever, while time quietly passes the bill. There is comfort in caution because it removes responsibility. If nothing is done, nothing can go wrong, or so it seems. But inaction is still a decision, and it has consequences just as real as any mistake. Lost time cannot be recovered. Missed compounding does not apologize. Opportunities do not wait to be understood. They wait to be taken. Fear also hides behind the desire to protect what already exists. Why risk what's already working? That question feels logical. But progress requires accepting temporary discomfort in exchange for long-term resilience. What feels stable today may be vulnerable tomorrow. Clinging too tightly to the present can quietly sabotage the future. Another way fear disguises itself is through overanalysis. Endless research, constant comparison, always one more opinion to consult. Information becomes a shelter, not a tool. Knowledge is collected, but action is postponed. Eventually, the act of preparing replaces the act of building. True caution does not paralyze. It clarifies. It asks, what is the downside, and can it be survived? Most risks, when examined honestly, are not fatal. They are uncomfortable. They bruise the ego. They challenge identity, but fear exaggerates them until they feel permanent, even when they are temporary. Fear also distorts time. It magnifies short-term pain and minimizes long-term cost. It says, avoid the loss today, while ignoring the decades of growth that could have followed. Caution considers both. Fear looks only at the nearest step and forgets the road. Financially, this shows up as avoiding ownership, avoiding volatility, avoiding responsibility. Emotionally, it shows up as staying in familiar routines long after they stop serving growth. Spiritually, it shows up as mistrust of oneself, of patience, of the future. Growth demands a willingness to be misunderstood by the present version of yourself. Every meaningful step forward once felt risky. Every stable foundation once required uncertainty. The goal is not to eliminate fear, it is to recognize it, name it, and refuse to let it make decisions. Courage is often misrepresented as boldness. In reality, it is quiet. It shows up as consistency during uncertainty, as discipline during doubt, as action taken without applause. Courage does not feel confident. It feels committed. The cost of letting fear lead is rarely obvious at first. Life continues, income arrives, routines hold, but years later, the cost becomes clear, not in what went wrong, but in what never happened. Potential left unused, freedom postponed, regret quietly accumulated. Caution asks, is this worth the risk? Fee? AR asks, what if this fails? One question builds a future. The other preserves the present at any cost. Progress begins when fear is exposed for what it is, not wisdom, not patience, not responsibility, but a story the mind tells to avoid discomfort. When that story loses its authority, action becomes possible. And when action becomes habitual, fear loses its power. The path forward has never belonged to the fearless. It belongs to those who learn to walk while afraid and moved anyway, trading time for comfort instead of compounding. Time is the only asset that cannot be replaced, refunded, or renegotiated. Yet it is often spent as if it were abundant and permanent. One of the most costly mistakes is trading time for comfort, choosing what feels easy now instead of what quietly compounds later. Comfort is seductive because it feels earned. After effort comes relief. After discipline comes reward. But when comfort becomes a default instead of an occasional rest, growth slows. Compounding requires patience, repetition, and the willingness to delay gratification. Comfort asks for none of those things. It asks only to be maintained. Many people underestimate how powerful small actions become when given enough time. A modest habit repeated consistently can outperform grand gestures that arrive late. Compounding is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It builds silently, rewarding those who show up early and stay long enough to let time do the heavy lifting. The tragedy is that early time is often what? Stead because its value is invisible. Youth feels infinite. Decades seem distant. The cost of delay feels small, almost harmless. But time does not work linearly. The first years matter more than the last. Every year postponed reduces the force of compounding even if effort later increases. Comfort often disguises itself as balance. There will be time later. Life should be enjoyed now. These ideas are not wrong, but when misused, they become excuses. Enjoyment that sacrifices the future is not freedom. It is borrowing against tomorrow. True balance honors both the present and the future, not one at the expense of the other. Trading time for comfort also shows up in effort. Choosing ease over discipline, convenience over consistency. The problem is not rest, it is surrender. When short-term pleasure becomes routine, long-term opportunity fades quietly in the background. Financially, this appears as spending now instead of investing early. Emotionally, it appears as avoiding learning, discomfort, or responsibility. Spiritually, it appears as forgetting that time is a gift meant to be stewarded, not consumed thoughtlessly. Compounding rewards behavior more than brilliance. It does not require perfect decisions, only consistent ones. Missing a few days is forgivable. Missing a few years is expensive. The difference between security and regret is rarely a single decision. It is the accumulation of small choices made repeatedly. Another illusion of comfort is believing effort can be intensified later to make up for lost time. But time does not respond to urgency. It only responds to presence. Late effort is heavier, harder, and less forgiving. Early effort is light, flexible, and extraordinarily powerful. Comfort also narrows vision. When life feels easy, urgency disappears. But urgency is not stress, it is awareness. Awareness that today's choices echo forward. Awareness that compounding favors the patient, not the rushed. There is a deeper cost to trading time for comfort, the erosion of discipline. Discipline is a muscle. When unused, it weakens. When exercised daily, it becomes automatic. Comfort weakens discipline. Compounding strengthens it. One leads to dependence. The other leads to freedom. Freedom does not come from ease. It comes from alignment. Alignment between values and behavior. Alignment between today's actions and tomorrow's needs. Compounding is simply alignment sustained over time. Perhaps the most painful realization comes later when effort finally increases, but time has already passed. The work feels heavier, the margin for error shrinks. Pressure replaces patience. What once required consistency now demands sacrifice. This is not a call to reject comfort entirely. Rest is necessary, joy matters, but comfort must be intentional, not habitual. Rest should restore energy for growth, not replace it. The future does not punish people for enjoying life. It responds to patterns. And patterns formed early shape outcomes later. Time is always compounding something, either growth or regret. There is no neutral state. Each day either adds momentum or subtracts possibility. The quiet power of compounding belongs to those who understand this truth early. Comfort feels good today. Discipline feels good later, and later lasts longer. Ignoring behavior while obsessing over knowledge. Knowledge has never been more accessible than it is today. Information flows constantly, books, articles, videos, opinions, endlessly available at the tap of a finger. And yet, for all this knowledge, the results in life remain uneven. The reason is simple and uncomfortable. Knowing what to do is not the same as doing it. One of the most common mistakes is believing that learning alone creates progress. It feels productive, it feels responsible, it feels like preparation. But preparation without action becomes a refuge, not a path forward. Knowledge comforts the mind. Behavior builds the future. Behavior is quiet. It lacks the excitement of discovery. It does not feel impressive. It repeats the same actions even when there is nothing new to learn. And because it feels ordinary, it is often neglected. But it is behavior, not insight, that compounds. Many people delay action while waiting to feel confident. But confidence is not a prerequisite for action. It is a result of action repeated over time. Waiting to feel ready often means waiting forever. Growth begins when behavior leads and confidence follows. Obsessing over knoll. DGE can also become a form of fear. The mind says learn more so you don't make a mistake. But mistakes are part of every meaningful process. Avoiding them completely means avoiding movement altogether. Perfect understanding is not required. Consistent behavior is. Another trap is believing that intelligence guarantees success. Intelligence helps, but discipline decides. The world is filled with knowledgeable people who never followed through, and disciplined people who quietly surpass them. Results do not reward potential. They reward patterns. Behavior reveals priorities more honestly than intentions ever could. Intentions live in thought. Behavior lives in reality. What is done daily, especially when no one is watching, determines outcomes far more than what is understood intellectually. There is also a tendency to confuse complexity with effectiveness. Sophisticated strategies feel powerful. Simple habits feel insufficient. But complexity often hides inconsistency. Simplicity, when practiced faithfully, becomes unstoppable. Compounding does not care how clever a strategy is. It cares how long it is sustained. Financially, this mistake shows up as knowing the importance of saving, investing, and patience, yet failing to act on them consistently. Emotionally, it shows up as setting goals without building routines. Spiritually, it shows up as insight without embodiment. Behavior is uncomfortable because it demands responsibility. Once action begins, excuses disappear, progress can be measured, failure becomes visible. Knowledge allows the illusion of movement without the risk of exposure. That is why it is so tempting to stay there. The hardest part of any journey is not understanding what to do. It is doing it when motivation fades. Behavior continues even when enthusiasm is gone. That is its power. Discipline bridges the gap between intention and outcome. Another overlooked truth is that behavior shapes identity. Repeated actions quietly rewrite self-belief. Someone who acts consistently begins to see themselves differently. Identity shifts and behavior becomes easier. Knowledge alone cannot create this transformation. The world does not change for those who understand it. It changes for those who engage with it. Insight without action is like a map never followed. It may be accurate, but it goes nowhere. Perhaps the most painful cost of ignoring behavior is regret. Not regret over bad decisions, but regret over inaction, over opportunities understood but never pursued, over wisdom acquired but never applied. Behavior does not need to be dramatic. It needs to be reliable. Small actions, taken daily, outperform bursts of motivation every time. Systems matter more than goals. Habits matter more than plans. The future is built by repetition, not revelation. It is shaped by what is done consistently, not what is known occasionally. No. Ledge points the way. Behavior walks the path. And only one of them gets you where you want to go.